Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins alongside BadgerBlitz.com publisher John McNamara. Great to see you as always, buddy.
Great to see you too, Matt.
So the Badgers are coming off of another really strong Big Ten victory where they defeated Northwestern on a windy day next to the lake, 23-3, and another dominant performance for Wisconsin's defense. And that seems to be where all eyes are focused this week as Penn State comes to town. Top 5 Penn State is sort of, hitting on all cylinders at the moment and coming off of a bye for what's going to be a night game at Camp Randall. Hopefully the crowd will be pretty loud there, John. But the matchup everyone is talking about is Penn State's offense, guided by new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, versus Wisconsin's improving defense. So what are you looking for in here for the Badgers against a formidable offense?
Yeah, I think right away you talk about the atmosphere, the night game and everything that goes into it. And, this game feels very different than it did, just 3 weeks ago, where I think at that time, maybe part of the fan base is worried that Wisconsin gets run off the field. But now I feel like as a collective, the fan base feels like this is a game that Wisconsin should certainly compete in, and potentially with some special Camp Randall under the lights, everyone's a little lubed up type of energy, that Wisconsin can come away with a victory here. So, I don't want to say it's night and day difference, but everything about this team feels a little bit different right now, and the mood is different, and the outlook is very different. I certainly don't feel like this is a team that will be Big Ten champions, but they're a one-loss conference team right now with a chance to beat some really good football teams coming up on their schedule here, starting with Penn State. Penn State number 3 in the country, but they don't feel like a world beater to me after watching, a lot of their games this year. Obviously I think they're a more talented roster than Wisconsin, and I worry about their running backs. They got a really nice 1-2 punch with 2 guys that Wisconsin went after. Nicholas Singleton, they went after really hard, I think in that 2022 class. But, this feels like a game where Wisconsin's not going to be overmatched in a ton of areas. Again, I think the Penn State roster is more talented. I don't know that you can make an argument for that, but this feels like a game that if Wisconsin plays the way that they can play on both sides of the ball, it should be a really competitive 4-quarter game.
I think that one of the things that's been really notable for me during this, mini stretch we've been talking about is the improved run defense, right? Which was a big problem coming into the season with the limited amount of defensive linemen that were just simply on the roster and showing up. And Elijah Hills has gone a long way to sort of assuage those concerns, if you will. And you've seen adjustments by Mike Tressel and the defense to really bring the outside linebackers on the line of scrimmage, darn near every single play, essentially functioning as defensive ends. And I think when I'm watching this team, I'm almost looking at this defense as a 4-2-5 now. It's not a 2-4. It's not a 2-4-5. It's not a 3-3-5. This is a 4-2-5 defense. This is very akin to what Gary Patterson was running at TCU, I want to say in the late 2000s-ish, when they were going up against a lot of more spread teams. At that point, I think, I forget what conference they were in, but it was Mountain West. They were in the Mountain West at that point, and they were running into a lot of different teams, and that 4-2-5 was really adaptable. And I think that's sort of what's happening here. So I think I'm kind of throwing out the names of the positions at this point and just sort of looking at what they're functionally doing on the field. And John Pius really stood out to me in this last game. Best game as a Badger for sure. And his growth and Daryl Peterson continuing to be very strong against the run are really necessary for Wisconsin in this matchup against Penn State, because if Penn State's able to set the edge, I think it's over for the Badgers. And so those guys have to continue to be disruptors and really push who's ever blocking them, get them out of the way, and make it so that, they can't open up those big holes, and especially outside for both of those very talented tailbacks.
Yeah, and I think that's a credit to Mike Tressel, right? This is what I have. This is what I have to work with, specifically on the defensive line. Hills has been a really nice surprise. Kurt Neal, I think, has been solid. You see a little bit more Brandon Lane, not as much Cade McDonald. So, I mean, you started the year off, you lose James Thompson Jr., and that's a really difficult blow. So credit to the coaching staff to work with what they have available, and like you talked about, Matt, more of that outside linebacker play. I think they've been really good. They have been good against the run, right? And I think you could put Aaron Witt in that conversation as well. He's a guy that could set the edge, does a good job there. I feel like we still need some pass rush there from that group. I mean, if you're looking for what Wisconsin needs to do to kind of take another big jump, and look, their defense has been lights out the last 3 weeks. You could make an argument for, and I think that the counter to that is, well, who did they play? But look, you hold those teams to the amounts that they did. That's impressive any way that you look at it. So I think if you want to see the next jump, it's got to be to get some pressure on the quarterback, especially with Penn State and Oregon's coming up and Nebraska, and so if there's one more jump to be made, trying to get some pressure on that quarterback, because it hasn't been there at times, but they have been very good against the run. I would agree, Matt.
So I just want to flip over to the other side of the ball really quickly, because the other sort of thing that's gone hand in hand with a really solid run defense has been a really good rushing attack, led by obviously Tawee Walker and the offensive line, who continue to grade out better and better. PFF is one metric that we can use. It is not the be all end all that I think some people have been chalking it up to be, because the eye test supports this, and we've seen some of Wisconsin's offensive linemen and just the unit as a whole. And I want to sort of credit the tight ends as well for some of this, because the rushing attack is consistent at this point, which is something that we definitely could not say at any point last year and at the beginning of this season. So I think that is going to be at the end of the day, for Wisconsin's offense to be successful, they have to continue to be successful in the run game and on first down in general. I mean, I think that's, pretty normal for most teams in college football, but it's especially important when you are going up against a team of Penn State's caliber and Penn State's talent level, and just sort of their national profile. So what are you looking for here, John, when the Badgers have the ball against Penn State?
I'm curious to see how long can Tawee Walker continue to put up these performances as very much the lead back now. I'm not saying that he can't, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Wisconsin's success has come when they have reshuffled that room and really made it an emphasis, right, to have a lead back and then to have complementary backs. Whereas at the start of the year, it was, we have 4 or 5 guys. Let's try to get all these guys carries. And that's another credit to the staff for going and looking at what do we need to change, what's working, what's not working, and what they found at running back seems to be working, right? So, can Walker continue to get 20-ish carries a game? Can he continue to have that production? A lot of it, though, like you talked about, Matt, is that improved offensive line play. That unit has been very, very good, particularly as of late. The tight ends, I think, are blocking well. I mean, you watch a guy like Riley Nowakowski. He's not a receiving threat. I mean, he's essentially a fullback, the way that they use him. But I think he's been another piece to that offensive line and the success that they've had there. So things are kind of firing there. But, in terms of what I'm looking for, can you continue to get those big plays? Can Vinny Anthony get open? Will you have a guy like Will Pauling be available? I think you got to continue to try to get balls in the hands of your playmakers and have them get out in space. But look, if they can run the football in the kind of old school Wisconsin, I think they're going to have success against Penn State. But that's, easier said than done. Penn State is loaded up front. I mean, I think that you'll have an easier time probably passing against them than you will running against them. The strength is very much up front.
The one thing that Wisconsin didn't do against Northwestern offensively was hit the deep ball. They took some shots, but they didn't hit any of the deep balls. And I think they've got to hit 2 or 3 of those if they are going to be able to open up the run game and the underneath game enough to be, a true threat. Especially obviously the Braden Locke to Vinny Anthony connection has been special. They didn't catch the big one against Penn State, against Northwestern. They'll need to against Penn State this weekend. On the recruiting chill, let's flip over to there, because there was a pretty big commitment, both physically and metaphorically, with Drayden Pavey, the let's call him a Purdue flip. I mean, he decommitted for half a second and then committed to Wisconsin. So Purdue flip, that marks the fourth member of a defensive line class, which is now, going from, a relative weakness to at least a relative strength in terms of numbers. So what does this mean for, Coach Whitlow and sort of the larger 2025 class?
Personally, I love the addition of another lineman to this class, defensive lineman to this group. The recruiting cycle goes and it has twists and turns and ups and downs. And there was a point where, talking to some people close to things, that they may only take two defensive linemen in this class. And obviously with the way things work out, now they're looking at 4. And I think that's the appropriate number. This is just kind of my personal thoughts. I think you just continue to add talent to that room and see what sticks. It's difficult to address defensive line through the transfer portal. Wisconsin has saw that. They've experienced that recently. Obviously, you have the Elijah Hillses of the world who have been a success, but then a guy like Darian Varner comes and he kind of fizzles out. So I think long-term, Wisconsin's best plan for that is to get guys through high school recruiting, develop them, and hopefully you have some 3rd, 4th, and 5th year guys playing for you. And a guy like Pavey, he was a plan A defensive lineman for them this summer. He visited 3 schools, Indiana, Purdue, and Wisconsin officially. Right after that Wisconsin visit, we got really good buzz about the Badgers. But then, Purdue won out in that recruitment, but, credit EJ Whitlow, credit that recruiting department. And Luke Fickle played a part in this too. And that kind of shows just how important Pavey was to this group of continue to stay in contact. And then, it's just like vultures circling, right? You see a program like Purdue, it just kind of crawling through the desert, looking for some water. And look, this is just the way college football is. And they've had a number of decommitments, and Wisconsin snatches, Pavey. I really like him in the addition to this class. A true defensive tackle, can play, probably bump outside a little bit, but I think he's a true stout defensive tackle to add to that group. Maybe a little insurance policy if Wilders and Telemock continues to look elsewhere. Colorado's been a school that's been mentioned with him. It wouldn't be surprising to see him pop up on that campus. Minnesota's been mentioned too. I'm sure that makes Wisconsin fans question or scratch their heads a little bit, but look, this is just the way it is. So look, 4 commits right now. Wisconsin obviously feels good about all 4, but a guy like Telemock has been on the record saying that he could potentially visit other schools. So Pavey helps in that department as well.
You mentioned the vulture circling. It's very akin to Dylan Johnson just a year ago, right? There was turmoil at Northwestern. Wisconsin comes in and scoops up a guy who was a, plan, maybe 8.5, maybe not a true plan A guy, but someone who was pretty darn close and they liked a lot when he camped. So I think that is a good sign for the 2024 class, especially if they can keep all 4 and stick to all 4. That will, I think, give more positional flexibility for the rest, especially the linebackers as well. If some of those guys are able to develop and turn into the James Thompson types who the Wisconsin still doesn't have on this year's version of the defensive line, and it's definitely someone that they will want going forward. With this, how many spots do you see left in 2025? I think that I could see maybe 1 or 2 more flips coming, but it feels like they're pretty locked in at this point.
It sounds like you're hinting at something, Matt. I would say there are 2 spots left. I would say 1. I feel like they want to add a corner in this class.
Yes, absolutely.
Gentry has been the guy that's been around forever, but they've also extended a new offer at that spot, and I wouldn't be surprised if the guy that they offered popped up on campus in the next couple weeks here. So that's a position that I know that they've kind of allocated a spot for. Going back just a couple months, it's like, yeah, Gentry's our top guy, but we're gonna continue to look. We're not gonna put all our eggs in that basket. And then there would be someone on the offensive side of the ball that, if things work out the way that I would think things work out, that they would add another offensive weapon to that class. could come as early as, well, I don't, this one is one that I don't see any rush towards. I don't think that there's any, we got to get this done type thing. I think eventually will. And I know that fans are going to love to hear that and wonder who, whatever we're talking about. But I think 2 more spots, a corner and another offensive weapon. The rest of the focus is hang on to the guys who are currently committed. And then signing day's a little earlier this year. It even caught me by surprise. I was like, whoa, got to adjust the calendar a little bit because it's December 4th. So I think that hits right before the portal window opens. So
I love that. I love that personally. I think that is the NCAA rules have gotten really wonky. And if you talk to people who work in recruiting departments, they will point out some of the giant issues with the recruiting calendar as it is in terms of how many different things are all happening at once at certain parts of the year. So I think that early signing date for the prep class is huge. And is sort of like the first step to really addressing this issue of portal windows being open at the same time as you've got guys committed but not signed. It's a really wonky thing. But it is a really interesting discussion that I would love to have at some point. But speaking of preps as well, Wisconsin high school playoff brackets have come out. It's exciting. It's an exciting time of year, obviously, John. First round is this weekend. I guess I'll start with a relatively general question. What stands out to you about the bracket?
Well, every year people are upset, and my team isn't here, and my team should be here. And every year, I shouldn't say every year, but recently, there are some legitimate arguments that can be made 100%. There has been some stuff that I know that the Journal Sentinel's covered in terms of, Greenfield, I believe Madison and West, who should have been qualified to make the playoffs or were qualified and were left on the outside looking in. It started to get in some legal talk, and I'm just not that smart, so I just kind of glossed over it. So my take home is that Greenfield, Madison, West have a case to be in the playoffs. But then you look at like the seeding, and you have a team like Oconomowoc in the Division I field who went through the toughest conference in the state, and they are a 6 seed going on the road to play a really good Racine Case team that is a 1-loss team, and their 1 loss is to an undefeated Franklin. I think that's a really big discrepancy, and I have no dog in the fight there. And there are a few other cases where a team is seated below a team that they beat during the season. So I'm all for the computer setting the base. Let the computer spit something out, but have some adults come in and take a look at it. And this isn't just me just on my soapbox. I talk to a lot of high school coaches. Not a ton, not as much as maybe other people do, but people are just like, they don't know what to say because some of this stuff is so outrageous that it's almost like they put it out there just to see what the reaction would be. I mean, there are some things that the computer puts out there, and someone should just go in and say, hey, that is just not right. Let's correct this. And I don't know why that's not the way it is. I'm sure there's a lot of red tape and everything that goes into it, but there are things that the adults in the room should be able to correct because we're talking about high school kids. And, there's a way to get this right, or a way to just get it closer to being more evenly matched, more fair. There's just a better way to do this. And I don't know why the WIAA is so stubborn in the way that they go about this, because there are absolute discrepancies 1 through 7 in the field of the playoffs. And they just spit it out and roll with it. And they don't really care what people think. So it is what it is. If you want to be a state title contender, you got to be the best. But you look at a school like Case, I mean, they might have to go through Oconomowoc, then Mugwanago, then Verona, then Franklin, and then maybe a Marquette at the end. That would be probably the most unbelievable run in the history of Wisconsin high school state football, but it is what it is. I mean, there are some good matchups if you are the fan point of view. There are some great matchups if you like high school football starting right away on Friday.
What's your favorite matchup of the first round?
Case Oconomowoc. I mean, that
it's got
Oconomowoc. Yeah, and those are two. programs with different histories, right? I mean, this is probably the best Case team that's been there for a very long time. They are loaded on offense. They have playmakers. Not a team that has a whole lot of playoff experience. Then you have a team like Oconomowoc. They've been there. Then they dipped off a little bit. Now they're back up at the top. This is the team that has come through the best conference in high school football, and they're a one-loss team. The loss comes to McGuanago, which is another one-loss team. So they are battle tested. They have a tight end who's committed to Michigan State, who's very good running attack. But as a 6 seed, they go on the road to Racine, and they got to go play their first game on the road, that must seem wild to that coaching staff, to the players. You have come out of, like I said, the best conference in the state with one loss, and you get a 6 seed slapped on you, and they put you on a bus to go to Racine to play your first game. I think that's tough, but look, I guess it's whatever your mentality is. You're going to have to play really good football teams to get to where you'd like to go. It's just going to start probably a little bit earlier than maybe you anticipated.
And maybe that makes them even more angry. Like, I think there's a chase that Oconomowoc comes out and just dominates, because to show everyone that, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? The WIAA being stubborn. Like, no one should be surprised by this at this point. So one of the other early round matchups that I really like is Oak Creek and Muskego. I think that's going to be a tight game. There's some real talent on both of these teams, and Oak Creek is I don't want to say maybe a dark horse to make a run. I mean, they have to play Franklin in the second round, even if they get out of here. So, but they're a team that I like a lot, just for some of their more upper echelon talent. But anything else besides the Case Oconomowoc game standing out to you?
I think you look at the other side of the bracket, and Marquette's probably my team to get to state and likely to win state, potentially repeat this year. I don't want to say their side is weak or soft or anything like that, but I think they have a nice path to get to Camp Randall again. That's a team that's kind of clicking at the right time. They'll have to go through, I think, Bayport's over there, potentially Waunakee. You talk about perennial state powers. Waunakee's up there with just about any other really good program in the state. So they're going to be tested, but Marquette would probably be my pick to come out of the other side there. And then, maybe it's a Franklin, maybe it's a Verona, maybe it's a Racine Case, maybe it's Oconomowoc, maybe it's McGuanago. That other side is just loaded. It really is. So, whatever team comes out of that other side will be battle tested, hopefully healthy, and hopefully it's a really good matchup at Camp Randall for whatever team makes it out of that D1 field.
So for that final, I'm taking Verona to the house. I said before the season that Trey Poteet is the best player in the state, and I think this season really confirmed that for me.
Yeah.
And I think that he is the best player in the state, and even if he's not a quarterback, he's one of the rare talents that can get it done nearly on his own, just because of how special of a player he is. And I think he's going to lead them to, maybe it's a bit of an upset, but I think they're going to come out of that really tough right side of the bracket and end up as the champs and show them that, this kid is a special talent who's having a truly special season.
Yeah, playoff time with a guy like Poteet, maybe they have used him in every facet, right? But maybe you just absolutely turn him loose. He's going to play every defensive rep. He's going to get 20 carries at running back. He'll get 15 reps at receiver. He's going to return kicks. He's going to return punts. I don't know. Maybe he'll kick field goals. Maybe he'll punt a little bit for you too. But, there is a attrition of the season where you want to play him in the appropriate spots, but maybe you just completely turn him loose now, because that offense has at times the defense is very, very, very good. But maybe just turn Trey Poteet loose and say, you will play as much as you're able to play, and get us to Camp Randall just down the street.
So that's where I'm going in the D1 bracket. John, any thoughts on, if you had to, put your money where your mouth is, who do you have coming out of the D1 bracket? And I'm curious as to your D2 thoughts as well.
Marquette would be my pick to repeat this year. Like I said, I think they're kind of clicking at the right time. Good running attack with Tommy Novotny. He's a really good running back. I feel like he's a D1 type of guy. Maybe not at the highest level, maybe not a power 4 guy, but
I think he's the kind of kid who fits perfectly at NIU.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's where he'll end up. Or those Marquette guys, they send guys to the Ivy League. Maybe he ends up in an Ivy League school. I don't know. We'll kind of see what happens with his recruitment. But that would be my pick in D1. I feel like I've looked so much at the D1 because it's so loaded. But D2, there's some really good schools there. I think that one is a little bit more kind of wide open, where I think you can make a case for a number of schools. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how those cards unfold as well. But I guess I'd be real honest with you. A lot of my attention's been on that D1 field and kind of analyzing that and looking at the programs there.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating matchup across the board this year. So that is going to do it for us here today on Badger Blitz TV. John, appreciate you joining us before. I know it's going to be a very busy day for you, a very busy weekend for everyone around the Badgers. Make sure that you are subscribing to BadgerBlitz.com for the best Badger information and message boards anywhere in the world, anywhere in the known universe. So thanks again for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. And until next time, we'll see you in the den.